In the early 40s, IBM President Thomas Watson remarked, "I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers." 30 years later, Digital founder Ken Olsen said, "There is no reason for any individual to have a computer in his home." These predictions seem foolish now, but at the time, Watson was right. There were only a few computers in the world. And when a computer is the size of a house, you really didn't need to have one in every single house. When you look at the history of computing, you can see a sort of generational pattern. As technology gets more and more advanced, computers get smaller and more powerful. Transistors allowed computers to fit in the corner of your room. Microchips made them small enough to sit on the corner of your desk, and high-speed internet has allowed computers to communicate across the world. Every time computers get smaller and more powerful, we are able to interact with them in new ways, which, as you'll see, leads to new profit models and new companies dominating the industry. It would be Thomas Watson's son, Thomas Watson Jr., who ushered in the next generation of computers. When he took over his father's position as CEO of IBM, he started moving the company's business away from punch card machines, which could require entire floors full of cartons just to house all of the cards, and he started moving towards computing machines. Before this, computing was reserved to very large, expensive government projects, but IBM was able to use new technology in their mainframe and mini-computers to make computing accessible to businesses around the world. IBM's success gave them a 70% share of the computing market, but that led to accusations that they were abusing their monopoly power. IBM was charged with using anti-competitive strategies, like introducing new machines just to push a competing line out of business, or bundling and offering discounts to capture important customers, or setting industry standards based on their own products instead of what was best for the industry. This led to a 13-year antitrust lawsuit against them, which IBM eventually won, even though it cost them millions of dollars each year. IBM was the king during the mainframe and mini-computer era, but that would soon change. Computers were getting small enough to fit on your desk, and IBM was late to catch on to the trend. They needed to release a personal computer quickly so they could compete with the Apple II and other PC competitors. Now, in the past, IBM had developed all their hardware and software in-house. They would take years to build a single product. But because the PC market was moving so fast, and because IBM was late to the game, they only had a few months to get a computer to market. So IBM built their PC with an open architecture and just used off-the-shelf parts. Once they had all the hardware, the last thing they needed to sell their PC was an operating system. For this, they went to Bill Gates at Microsoft, who pretty much jumped at the opportunity. Now, Microsoft didn't actually have an operating system to sell them, but they purchased a system named Quick and Dirty Operating System, or QDOS, from another company in Seattle. They paid $25,000 for the purchase, changed the name to DOS, and then licensed it to IBM for $50,000 royalty-free. It seemed like a pretty good deal for IBM at the time, but it really was the deal of a lifetime for Microsoft. The IBM PC became popular because of its open architecture and off-the-shelf parts, but this also meant that it was easy for other companies like Dell and Compaq to buy the same parts and make their own IBM-compatible PCs. You could buy a computer with the same hardware and standards anywhere so long as it ran the software that you needed to run. And before you could run that software, you needed to buy a copy of Windows or DOS from Microsoft. Microsoft became the new leader because in the PC era, hardware didn't matter anymore. The biggest profits were in selling software. Now, because just about every software application you wanted to install needed Microsoft Windows to run, they had a huge amount of power. And they were able to leverage that power against their competitors so often that Microsoft was seen as basically the evil empire during this time. So if vendors like Compaq wanted to sell computers with software from a competitor to Microsoft, or if they didn't want to bundle Windows, Microsoft could just threaten to raise their licensing fees and effectively force them to include Microsoft software. When they wanted their web browser, Internet Explorer, to drive Netscape out of the market, all Microsoft had to do was bundle it with Windows. Most people would just use the browser that was already installed on their computer. Netscape filed an antitrust suit against Microsoft, and they eventually won, but by that time Internet Explorer had 96% of the market share. What eventually killed Microsoft's stranglehold was the Internet revolution. In the mid-90s, developers started to figure out you could use web browsers not just for displaying information, but you could actually build an entire application that runs inside of your browser. Google was the first large company to capitalize on this, with apps like Gmail and Google Docs and Google Calendar. Now you could replace almost all of Microsoft's Office products with Google for free. You could access and edit your documents from any computer or any device with an internet connection. And you could share them without needing the person you share them with to have a copy of Microsoft Office. All they needed was a web browser. Once again, as the technology changed, the profit models also had to change. You can't make money selling software when all your software runs in the cloud. And a lot of web companies provide services that most people really don't want to pay for. People have come to expect platforms like Twitter or Facebook or Google to be free. In the cloud computing age, the biggest players make their money through selling ads. They are the applications that you need to sign into to access your data, and who can process large amounts of user data to show more and more focused advertisements. Software purchases aren't relevant anymore. In the internet age, data is king. It's important to understand how the tech landscape has changed in the past so we can get more clues for where they might go in the future. Right now, Google and Facebook and Amazon seem unstoppable. They've become sort of the new evil empire. But this is a road we've been down before. When tech companies become giants, they have a huge amount of power, but they can only hold on to that power for so long. People will try to fight that power by starting competitors, or through legal means like antitrust suits, but ultimately, it takes a technological revolution to dethrone the giants. As companies become large, they also become more bureaucratic and less innovative. IBM rushed their PC to market. Microsoft didn't update Internet Explorer for 5 years. Their sloth during a technological revolution left an opening for new companies to take over. IBM and Microsoft are still around, and they are still huge, but they have much less power to control the marketplace. Google's fall seems inevitable. Google has grown large and out of touch. They have become so infected with the virus of social justice, they are defending firing employees like James Damore simply for expressing scientific truths. They are hosting talks by people who identify as dragons. This sort of thought policing, this is the type of environment that the best and brightest programmers usually don't want to work under. The internet as a platform model, frankly, I think is overvalued, and the cracks in its armor are starting to show. Their business revolves around providing services that most users aren't willing to pay for, meaning that most of these companies' profits revolve around selling ads. Basically, these giants are worth hundreds of billions of dollars, competing primarily in advertising. Advertising being an industry that revolves mainly around annoying people, and an industry which as a whole only brings in $250 billion per year. It's an industry that is leading tech companies to do things that are downright creepy. They're collecting data on every place you visit, listening through your phone's microphone so that when they hear you talking about how you need dog food, they can make sure the next thing you see when you open your phone is an ad for dog food. Web platforms suffer from several major problems: the invasion of privacy, the censoring of free speech, and a profit model that depends on showing ads people don't want to see. And with decentralized platforms like the blockchain, there is a budding new paradigm coming along that is offering solutions to all of these problems. Granted, none of this is proven. I can't really be sure what the next computing revolution will look like. But I think if you read the writing on the wall, if you consider the history of computing, it's pretty clear that the current state of technology won't last forever. It probably won't even last very long. Ultimately, the final blow to Twitter and Facebook and Google isn't going to come from a law. It's going to come from a new paradigm that most of us don't even fully understand yet. From the history of computing, one lesson is clear. Technology wants to be free.